Welcome to By the Books, the podcast helping business owners navigate the complex world of business, tax, and bookkeeping. Now, to the owner and president of Kline, Lindsay Kline.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to talk to you today about cost of goods sold. What is it? You may have seen this on your income statement, and you may or may not be familiar with what it is. Essentially, cost of goods sold is a specific type of expense. It's costs that are directly associated with goods or services sold by a company to its customers. Now, the key word there is direct expenses. For example, if you're a bookstore, the cost of your books that you're buying from your suppliers, that is a direct cost of something you're selling, and therefore would be considered a cost of goods sold. But it is a little bit more broad than that. You actually can include any direct costs, but also any necessary costs to get your merchandise or service into inventory and ready for sale. So, in the case of a book that you're selling, you actually could include any freight that had to be paid to get that book to the shelf. Manufacturers can include even more costs in their cost of goods sold. Those are a little bit more complicated because not only do you have the raw material and the freight to get the raw material, but you also could include storage fees, any direct labor cost to make the product, and even factory overhead for the area of the factory where those products are being manufactured. It's essentially any cost that can be directly related to making or purchasing that product and getting it ready for sale. Why is this important? Numerous reasons. If you look at an income statement, you're going to see something that either says gross profit, maybe gross margin, something with the word gross in it. And what that is, the formula for calculating that is your revenue minus your cost of goods sold. That gross profit, essentially that number is telling you what you have left over after your direct costs to cover your operating expenses. Operating expenses being your advertising, your utilities, your accounting people, your admin people, anything that is required to run your business. Gross profit tells you the number that you have left over for that. And there's usually industry standards for what that gross profit percentage should be. You should have a target. You should know what your target is and try to keep your cost of goods sold to that level so that you have enough to cover your operating expenses. And if that number becomes out of whack, maybe it's time to change pricing because that's the other control that you have is over your revenue. And if your cost of goods sold is becoming too high of a percentage and you're struggling to cover your operating expenses, perhaps it's time to raise those prices. So that's a good percentage to look at to determine, okay, am I where I need to be in order to cover my costs? You might have heard the expression below the line and above the line. What that's referring to is what is cost of goods sold versus what's operating expenses. If you hear someone say above the line, they're talking about direct expenses, costs of goods sold. If they talk about below the line, they're talking about your operating expenses. Another reason why this might be important is there's oftentimes state or local taxes that are calculated based on your gross profit. For example, here in the state of Texas, we have franchise taxes. Those franchise taxes are calculated based upon your gross profit, not revenue. So for that reason, it is really important to capture everything that you legally can in your cost of goods sold because that will lower your franchise tax liability. in addition to giving you good, solid numbers for reporting and understanding where you're at in your business, where your costing needs to be, where your pricing needs to be. These are all important things that you need to be looking at in order to know that you have things priced correctly. Thank you guys for tuning in. Next time, I'm going to talk about keeping your business and personal transactions segregated. Very important. Thank you so much for joining in. See you next time.
By the Books is presented by Kline. Honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time. For more information on Kline services or to get a hold of Lindsay, visit Kline.com or email info@Kline.com.
The information provided on this website and podcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials available are for general information purposes only. Information provided by Kline may not constitute the most up-to-date legal or other information. Listeners should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter and should refrain from acting on the basis of this information without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction. Only your individual attorney can provide assurances that the information contained herein and your interpretation of it is applicable or appropriate to your particular situation.